Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, friends from everywhere. Good morning, good evening, good night, whatever time you're calling in from, or maybe you're watching this later. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the group. I'm just going to mute everybody. Please stay muted throughout this conversation. I'd appreciate that. My name is Hunter. My pronouns are he, they, and you are at the Power to Fly Chat and Learn. And I am so excited to be chatting again with our speaker today. We were just reminiscing on old times from a year ago and catching up. So I'm so excited to bring them on. It's just gonna be one moment before we do that, because a little bit of housekeeping as promised. I like to stay true to my word, folks. You can participate in this conversation. This is interactive. You can turn your cameras on if you like. No need to be Instagram ready, you know. We're just people hanging out, talking about some important issues to us. Know that if you do turn your camera on, you will pop up potentially in the recording. There is going to be a rewatch link that we're going to put on our YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel dedicated to the Chat and Learns. Power to Fly has so many great resources on our YouTube channels. And we're also going to send a rewatch link in the next couple of days, so you can check your email boxes for that. And if you have any questions for our speaker, please do write them in the chat. And know that this is a public shared space, so I encourage you to be mindful of your language and be as inclusive as possible. You can ask them in the chat publicly with our friends here. They will not show up in the recording. Or if you want to ask something anonymously, you can go ahead and select my name in the participants section, select Hunter. You can DM me. It'll have like a little red thing. It'll say direct message. And I can ask that anonymously on your behalf. Okay, housekeeping complete. Okay, great. As I told Jenna, I came from the theater, so I just wanted to show off some pantomime skills. All right, so Jenna Rykiel. Jenna is a certified coach who empowers moms to build and grow thriving businesses without burning out. She believes that moms are uniquely qualified to be successful entrepreneurs and is dedicated to supporting them to integrate motherhood and business ownership on their own terms. With a background in counseling psychology and years of supporting corporate leaders to prevent burnout, she knows that it takes intention and accountability to show up for ourselves as leaders of our businesses and our households. She supports moms to thrive so their businesses and families can thrive too. Please welcome Jenna. Hello, Jenna.
Hello. It's so good to see you again, to be talking in this space. And I know that I obviously wrote that intro, like I provided it, but it's always so nice to hear someone else like read it back to you. It's like, oh my gosh, that's cool. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. And I love to, just to kick it off, like that's such an important thing to do for ourselves, right? To just like take it in, absorb it, and like give ourselves those little necessary pat on the backs, because there might be some days when no one else does it but us. So I think it's important that we do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we got to celebrate the small wins and definitely like be our own biggest cheerleader. One thing I talk with my clients all the time about is like getting to a place where we're treating ourselves like our businesses and our family's greatest asset. Because when we're doing that, we're just taking better care of ourselves in so many different ways. And that is really the crux of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how this is going to work, friends, is I have some questions for Jenna. You can ask questions. But first, we're going to do something a little different. I hear it's story time, Jenna. Is that right?
Well, not yet, Hunter. There are a few slides before the story.
Okay,
yes.
So let's get into it. So I don't want to I'm just so excited. I love a good story. So take me on a journey, and then there may or may not be, friends. I don't know. I heard a little birdie told me maybe there'll be story time.
There will be stories, there will be pictures, illustrations, all the things. But I do want to, set this conversation up. You're all here because you want to talk about guilt. which is such a lovely topic, right? We just all like love talking about guilt and shame, especially as it pertains to being parents. And so I want to say that, through like, I'm going to teach a tool, like that's why I'm here. And that's why I got in touch with Power to Fly, because I want to teach a tool for us to be able to navigate parent guilt and actually use it and turn it into momentum. So I always say mom guilt into momentum, but we're an inclusive group. So now it's parent guilt, which same thing, same tool. And actually you can use it with any emotion, but guilt seems to really, tug at our heartstrings and hold us back from a lot of things. So why this work matters is that our relationship with guilt is exhausting and prevents us from showing up as the parents and role models that we want to be. And it like zaps us and it's exhausting, and it seeps into all different areas of our life. It just takes over. It's like a heavy, wet blanket that coats us all day. I'm sure you all have felt that. And so really, this tool is to step out of that, and to give us a tool in our tool belt to be able to move through it. And as you see here, you're in the right place. If you've ever felt overwhelmed with guilt, you're in the right place. Oh, well, can you go down? Sorry, Hunter. Hunter promised that since he was in theater, he would be able to pick up on my cues. We're still getting warmed up, him and I together. But you're in the right place if you've ever felt overwhelmed by guilt, if you're constantly second guessing your decisions, if you want to stop going to bed, replaying all the day's decisions in your head. I've been there, we've all been there. If you're always wondering if you're doing it right, that's a lot of us too. And if you've ever been in a guilt or shame spiral for a decision you made about your kiddos. Right, so you are in the right place. I also wanted to read, it's like a little love letter to parents that I want to read. If you're a parent and and I'm reading because no ego amigo here, like I'd rather, get the information to you than pretend like I can remember it all. But if you're a parent and you've ever experienced the overwhelming, overbearing, unconditional love for a child, it means you've also experienced guilt. We feel guilty when we let them cry, even if it's just so we can go to the bathroom. We feel guilty when we're home from work physically, but haven't left work mentally. We feel guilty when they ask us why we're always on our phone or answering emails. We feel guilty when we drop them off at daycare or school and have to drive away when they still have tears in their eyes. I know a lot of parents are going through that right now. And guilt is one of those emotions that eats us alive and sends us into a deep, dark, downward spiral. I know because I'm a parent who experiences guilt as well. And we're human. And so we're always going to experience guilt, even with all the tools in the toolbox. It is a part of being human. And I'm also going to talk about how to reframe our relationship with it. So this is all why I created this quick 5-minute tool that any parent can use. So it's to have less time in guilt spirals and more energy for the things that matter in life. Less time stuck in guilt means more time being present with kids. Less guilt means better relationships with ourselves and our family. So take this tool seriously. Write it down, follow along with the activity, the story, and know that it's not that you're never going to feel stuck in guilt again. Like that's going to happen. But now we have a process and tool that we can use to work with it. Okay, so now it's story time. Meet Sarah. She's a hardworking mom who runs her own consulting business. She's a devoted mother to 2 beautiful children, Emily and Jacob, who you'll see on the next slide. She strives to balance business. Oh, sorry. Oh, and there we go. She strives to balance business responsibilities with the demands of motherhood. I'm sure everyone listening can relate. The day begins like any other. It's absolute chaos. It's a symphony of children's voices. Jacob's the youngest. As you can see, he's crying in his high chair, which we see on the next slide. Applesauce is everywhere. Emily's taken it upon herself to pour milk on her cereal. She's 3. And amidst the chaos, Sarah's thinking about a big presentation that she has the next day. Everything that she needs to get done. There's no time in the day. Why does she always have to do drop off and pick up? Then she realizes that Emily spilled her milk everywhere. And she yells and frightens Emily, who begins to cry. Now she has 2 crying babies. And while she hurries over to the paper towels to clean up the mess, she's frustrated, tired, overwhelmed, and feels like everything is falling on her, mostly because she's an entrepreneur. And so her schedule is more flexible. She gets in the car, she's able to get the kids to daycare, and she's just overwhelmed by this sense of guilt. Like it's just weighing on her. And whenever I tell this story, like I feel extra tense, like just from telling this story. Like it's probably, bad for my health to step into this every time I do this, but it's just this immense blanket of guilt. She's not able to focus on the presentation. She's not even able to focus on her kids when she picks them up. She's up until 11 p.m. Because she had to finish all the work she didn't get done in the day. And the weight of guilt is heavy on her. So she's wearing all the hats, but she feels like she's not doing it well. If you go back twice, Hunter. Okay. So that is Sarah's day, right? And it's one example of like how guilt can show up. We do something, we snap, and then we feel guilty about it, right? Now, I'm going to talk about this next version of the story, which is sort of a fast forward to Sarah after incorporating some tools from coaching, specifically the one I'm going to talk to you about today. And there are tons of tools that people can learn in coaching. But this is one that is so simple that you can build a practice of, and it really does make a huge difference. So we are going to, again, fast forward, and not you, Hunter, just, yes. Okay. Here's the start to the second story, right? It's important to know that we've seen this slide before because the day is exactly the same. Okay. It's complete chaos. Emily spills the cereal. Emily spills the milk. Jacob's crying, right? And also I didn't put the picture of Sarah snapping again, but Sarah still snaps. Okay. Because she's human and we all act in ways we aren't proud of sometimes. So all of that is still going to happen in this evolved world, this next story. We can get to a place where we are more equanimous. We were talking about meditation earlier, and not snap as easily, but we're not even going there because, this is a 5-minute tool where we still snap, but we're able to move past it quicker. So this time after Sarah snaps, she's able to see the story that she's creating about herself. And she's able to recognize that the story that's playing in her mind about guilt, like maybe that I'm a terrible mom, or I can't believe I snapped, that they're not true. And she's able to give herself grace. Okay. So when she picks up the kids from school and daycare, she reminds herself that she's human, right? Which we all could use more of. And in that moment, she's also able to have a conversation with Emily about, and apologize sincerely about what she said, how she snapped. And from that place of vulnerability, it builds a stronger bond with her and Emily. Okay. So Emily, of course, forgives her. I did put that slide in there. And then, okay, I'm sorry that that's not how I want to show up as a parent, right? She apologizes, Emily forgives her, and Emily has been modeled what forgiveness looks like. Okay, so that's the story. We all have the story, right? And we can say, like, that's wonderful for Emily. That's all fine and good. But there's this question about me, right? Like, I have 3 kids, right? I'm a single mom. My business is complicated. And yes, our situations are all different, but our brains all work the same. And this tool is a process. Our brains love process, a process that'll help us stay in that self-compassion and open way that we saw from Sarah in the second story. Okay. So now to the tool. And this is like, I promise, like 5 minutes. I'm going to stay true to that. So take out a piece of paper, because this is interactive. And you can go to the next slide. The first step, and I encourage everyone to have maybe, a pad of paper that you sleep with next to your bed on the nightstand, where you just kind of turn to this more on a more regular basis, right? Because this will help with all emotions, not just guilt, but guilt specifically is really important. Step number 1, you take out the piece of paper, and I want you to think about the last time you felt guilt or shame in your parenting. Maybe it's right now, maybe because you're here instead of somewhere else, or maybe like me, your child's crying in the other room. Somebody's taking care of my child, but he is crying. Or maybe it's earlier today when you dropped the kiddos off at school. But I want you to take a few seconds here. I always recommend 5 minutes, but we'll just take a few seconds and write down all of your thoughts that you have about what happened, right? Maybe it's judgments about yourself. For Sarah, maybe it's I'm a terrible mom. Why do I have to do everything myself? I'm so overwhelmed. Maybe I should give up my consulting business, right? Write it all down on this piece of paper. And we'll just give like a few minutes. And make sure you include the good, the bad, and the ugly. And maybe there's no good, and that is perfectly fine. I'm not going to ask you to share this. We really just want to get it out of our brains and onto a piece of paper. And we're going to throw the piece of paper away afterwards. Nobody in our life is going to see it. Okay. Okay. I hope everyone has at least like 3 to 5 things. I always recommend filling up the whole piece of paper. And depending on what state of mind you're in right now, that's going to be easier than other times, right? If you just got off of screaming at Emily, you're probably going to have a lot of thoughts. But right now, since Hunter and I did a deep breath before we came in here, it's like, less thoughts. Okay, step 2, really easy. Story versus fact. I want you at the top of your piece of paper to write the story I'm telling myself is. Right? Just that one line. This is from Brene Brown. Gotta love Brene Brown. She does a lot of work with shame and guilt. But just right at the top of the paper, the story I'm telling myself is. Now, I want you to look at everything you wrote down and understand the difference between a story and a fact. Right? If anyone has any facts that they wrote down on their piece of paper, please write them in the chat. Truthfully, the majority of what we write down in these moments are going to be stories. But a fact is something that's everybody in the world would agree, right? Everybody in the situation would agree. There's no subjectivity. It's completely objective. So does anyone have any facts that they wrote down? In Sarah's story, it could be that milk was on the floor. Jacob was crying. Also, another fact of Sarah's story is that she said words. So the words that she said, it's a fact that those words were said. But what we make that mean is then a story. Okay. I'm going to assume that everybody wrote down just stories instead of facts, which is normally what happens, or we're all just sleeping, which I hope not. I hope we're not sleeping, unless you're really tired and need it, and then I support it. So that's step 2, story versus fact. Everything that's written down, we can say the story I'm telling myself is, and it helps us to remove ourselves from what our brain is telling us, right? The story I'm telling myself is I'm a terrible mother for snapping, right? It's not a fact that I'm a terrible mother. It's just a story. And there's almost like this relief that happens when we step into that, that option, right? That everything was the story. Okay. Any questions about story versus fact? Because this is a very tricky thing when we're in the moment and when we're just like wrapped in that guilt or shame blanket. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Step 3. Forgiveness. Now, this isn't your typical like forgiveness that you feel all warm and cuddly inside. This is more like, since all of your thoughts are now down on paper and you can see the bad and the ugly that the gremlins between your ears are giving you, you're able to forgive yourself for the BS thoughts that you have, right? So it's not even that I forgive myself for snapping at Emily. It's I forgive myself for the BS thoughts or the BS story, right? Because, when we have everything written down and we see it as a story, we separate ourselves from it. And then we can often beat ourselves up and feel even guiltier about our stories. But we're just going to take that step out of it and just forgive ourselves for these wild thoughts that our brain likes to give us. Okay. That is it. And I would also recommend writing at the bottom of that page. And whenever you're doing this, writing at the bottom of the page, I forgive myself for the BS story. Or you don't even have to say BS if you want to keep it even more PG. You can say for these hurtful stories or for this not true stories, right? Okay. Now this might seem super simplified, and it is. I had a lot of mental drama about being so simple in these steps, but the goal is that you have something that you can pull up and do when you're at your worst, right? Something that's easy, the 3 steps, you have it, right? It's like write it all down, know that it's all a story, and then forgive myself for the story, right? Nothing's wrong with me. I'm just going to forgive myself for these stories. Okay. Now, the other thing I promised everyone in the write-up was like taking mom guilt and turning it into momentum, or taking parent guilt, turning it into momentum. So when we forgive ourselves, even if we're not like truly down deep inside forgiving ourselves, there is this momentum that's built, right? We're like, oh, this is a story that I'm telling myself. It's still like kind of is painful. This stinks, but it's just a story. And we get some momentum, right? At least we're not stuck in the mud. We can reframe our relationship with guilt. And that is actually where so much more of the momentum is built. So, and I think the next slide says reframing our relationship. Yes. So guilt, any emotion that we experience, and emotions are like what make up humans, right? It's like, we're going to experience all of them. And I tell my clients all the time, life is 50-50. So, and we're always doing stuff to try and feel a certain emotion. It's like, we want that promotion so that we can feel accomplished, or we want to go out on that date so we can feel love and belonging, right? Like, we're always doing stuff because we want to feel a certain way. But no matter what, we're always going to have 50% of our life be positive emotion, 50% of our life be negative emotion. It's just the way it is. The more we accept it, the more we can, get through and just thrive in negative emotion. If we just accept that we're human, it's supposed to be there. But also, every emotion has this, positive and negative within the emotion. Guilt is no different. So there's this negative cognition of it, which is, shame and self-hatred and judgment, and, loathing. But then there's also the gift of guilt, which we don't talk about very often. And it's actually the gift of guilt that I think creates the most momentum, which is that guilt is humbling. Okay. Like, when we are experiencing guilt, it's because we're not showing up in a way that aligns with our values as a parent. And that's a good thing, right? For us to have awareness that we want to do better, or we want to do something differently, right? And so there's this gift of guilt that is humbling us as parents. And then it also leads to this forgiveness, true forgiveness, not just writing it down on a piece of paper, right? As we saw with Sarah, she, was humbled by her mistake, and she was able to apologize to Emily. But it's not just apologizing to somebody, it's apologizing and forgiving ourselves, right? So that's like the layer deeper beyond just the tool. It's like being able to truly just forgive ourselves in this place of being humbled. And also, if we need to apologize to our kiddos, I know I grew up in a space where there wasn't that. It was sort of like, parents know what's best and they're never wrong. And I think we're really shifting that in this next generation of parents. And it's a beautiful thing to model that, and which is why I included it in the story, obviously. But there is this gift of that, right? If we didn't feel guilty, we wouldn't sort of have this this checks and balance of making sure that we are evolving as parents and showing up in the way that we truly want to. So that's the gift, right? It's keeping us in line with how we want to show up as parents. Okay. As I promised, that is the nuts and bolts of it. It's like, write it all down, all the thoughts. Recognize the thoughts as stories. Write, I forgive myself for these BS stories. And then we work on changing our relationship with guilt.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you for taking us on that exercise, Jenna. And, I am, as someone that is not a parent, there was so much that I still identified with in this journey about reframing guilt. I love what you said about reframing guilt and how we can incorporate that. And you talked about humility. And I also really appreciate this idea of modeling the behavior to our children that is different than the way that potentially we were brought up from a different generation of folks. And that's not easy, to completely 180 the way that we learned how to talk to the grownups.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And very inspiring, though.
Yeah. And it's hard.
Yeah.
Like, these are hard emotions to feel. They don't feel good. Right. And if you're like me, apologizing is really hard. It's probably because I grew up in that household. I love my parents. They're great. But also it was like not really modeled. And apologizing is so freeing. in so many ways. And so, yeah, it's hard. This stuff is not easy, but when we take a step into it, like not even take a step back, it's like, let's step into it and see what's happening in our brains and are able to separate ourselves from that, take this moment of just separating ourselves, we get so much more clarity in what to do next.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to write them in the chat. I will happily voice those on your behalf, or if you want to ask a question anonymously, I can also do that. And Jenna can also see the questions if you post them publicly in our little intimate public chat here.
The other thing I wanted to offer, too, because so the previous Power to Fly events that I had done, there were like 200, 300 people who registered. For this one, it was a much lower number, which I'm kind of like, come on, where's my mamas and my parents? But I was really excited for the chance to potentially coach and talk through this with people. So I know that that's really vulnerable, and like, yes, in all honesty, I probably wouldn't raise my hand to do that because I'm a little scaredy cat. But if anyone is sitting there and they're like, I'm a coach, like I do this all day with people. And it's really powerful to have people, talk through their insights and get to insights. So if there's anyone out there who wants to talk through anything, we can do that too.
Awesome. So you can, if your camera's on, you can raise your physical hand. If you, okay, great. We already have one. Lisa, I'm gonna bring you on. Hi, Lisa.
I just want to say thank you. I actually joined on to learn to help my patients or people that I coach, because my two kiddos are very grown. I'm not going to lie, this was very validating for me because I actually did a lot of this stuff. I kind of grew up learning that when you apologize, that's when you have self-esteem. When you are able to say, I am not perfect, but I am a great person. And, but I think this is great. And I honestly wish there were buku numbers of younger parents that are bringing up little ones, because it's so necessary, and especially in this day and age, because I'm only seeing the stress get worse and worse and worse. So yeah. So I just wanted to say I'm thankful that you are out there doing this, and I don't know if there's a way that I can share with other people that I know who have younger children and really could use this, your services or your information. So
yeah, no, I love that. So I will first off put my info in the chat here, like where you can find me, and also where you can follow some of the work. And then there's also what I do is I offer basically like a free mini session. It's a free discovery session where we dig deeper into what, like, not just guilt. Of course, like I'm all about giving moms time and energy back, right? It's like, I would love to live in a world where we never say I don't have enough time. Like that is like my big picture impossible goal, is to change our language around believing how much time we have, not just for our businesses, but also in our families, right? My husband and I made a commitment to never say, I can't wait until, with our kid, just because we didn't want to step out of the present moment. So even, the phases that are hard, we wanted to soak it in and not say, I can't wait until he can talk. I can't wait until he can walk. It's like, no, we just want to be present in this moment. And that started when I was, 40 weeks pregnant. And I was like, no, let's not say we can't wait until he gets here, right? Because then we'll just keep waiting until the next thing, and we just want to enjoy it. So, but all that to say, reframing our relationship with time actually gives us so much energy. Really reframing our relationship with guilt and those hard emotions gives us so much energy. And that's really like the goal, is to, give moms more time and energy so they can do more of what matters, because I hear it all the time. It's like, Hunter was just telling me earlier about his family, and hearing that, moms don't have their own identity anymore, or the things they do for fun, or they can't even use the spa gift certificate that they've had since the first kid was born. And I'm changing that.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
And I wish, I don't know, like you have that wish. My overall wish is that we could come up with a comprehensive tool of ideas of raising kids that you get when you're giving birth, because you cannot own a toaster oven without an instruction manual. There is nothing. You buy a toilet, there is an instruction manual. The one most important thing, I think, is raising kids. No instruction manual, nothing out there. So all of this great information, like, I just wish there were a way, and maybe someday there will be, that we just complete a guide, and it's just suggestions on how to not screw your kids up as much as you're going to anyway.
Yes, I was going to say that too. It's like, there's, even with a guide, we would screw it up, right?
Oh yeah,
It's like, even with the guide, we break the toaster.
No, of course.
Or we put the thing in the dishwasher that's not supposed to go in there, even though there's that thing that tells us, that beautiful guide that tells us not to. But it's also, there's this like beauty that comes, I think, in parenting. And yes, there's like the parenting that we maybe agree with and parenting we don't agree with, but it is this like beautiful, like, differences in the world, right? Like, if we had a manual, there would be so much, like, who created the manual? Is it, inclusive of everyone, all types of parents, all shapes and sizes, right? And it's like, there is this beauty in being able to be creative in the way you parent, and to sort of pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't. And that would be a very complicated manual, right? Like, I do think that something like Moms on Call, which is what my husband and I did, is a pretty like good, at least starting manual. And there's tons of resources for all the phases and stages.
Right.
But
I guess I mean it more as like almost like preventative type of things, like raising your child with a growth mindset.
Oh yeah.
Things like that we learn as coaches that don't necessarily come natural unless we learn about it, and that kind of thing, like, that, but I love that you're out there and doing this, and I'm writing down all your information, and I would love to share it with some people. So
thank you
so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for coming on and chatting. Like, this was great to have this like multiple voices.
And by the way, when my first one, who's now 35, our big thing, we joked around, but when she turned 15 and was like, all the things she was complaining about, like, I got her this beautiful little notebook and I gave it to her and I said, I want you to write things down when they come up for you. And she's like, I don't want to write it down. And I said, but you're going to need it when you go for therapy. You're going to want to look back at this, and you're going to want to remember exactly what you want to tell. And she was very insulted by my insinuation, but I was like, that's, that's what we do as parents, right?
Yeah, so, especially parents in the mental health field.
Yes. So.
Thank you, Lisa. I love that idea. That's a great tip for young adults, to give them more resources for information gathering, what they're trying to uncover, maybe where some of these things come from, and maybe save myself a few coins with maybe a couple extra less sessions.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
So we have about 15 or so minutes left. Jenna, we have a bunch of questions that were submitted in advance, and I have a couple as well. Is there anything else before I start digging into some of those? Any others topics that came up for you that you want to touch on before I jump in?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's like a million things I want to
Sure.
talk about, right?
Yeah, totally.
So maybe we should go with the questions where it
Yeah,
helps focus
we'll
in on
start
what-
there. Yeah. So we talked, in the story time.
Mhm.
I guess my theater skills are a little rusty. I apologize. We talked about the having that reframing of guilt. So, but before we get there, I'm curious about how can we pause, stop, slow down that cycle of feeling bad for, let's say, like you said, leaving your child because you have to go to work, or you're feeling frustrated that we don't, on the other side of it, that we're not giving enough time to our needs, like our businesses.
Mhm. So two things come to mind. The first is almost like so simple that, people just forget to do it, and that's breathe, right? Like there's something that happened. There's a really good book, and I saw like the book thing, and I wasn't going to recommend any books because like I just want people to just like do the simple stuff, right? But there is this great book, and it's called Breath or Breathe, I think. And it's all about breathing and the benefits of breathing and how we breathe, and how that helps us. And it's fascinating. I really recommend. So much of health is connected to our breath. And so just breathing, like Hunter and I did a deep breath before we started, and it's amazing how calming that is, right? How it brings us back. So when we're up here, and I did teach us all the time with my leaders with burnout, it's like when we're up here all the time, our nervous system is just kind of shutting down because it's not supposed to be up here all the time. So when we breathe and we relax our shoulders, and we just sit back, it does wonders for helping to give us clarity and helping us to do practices like this one. So breathe. It's like super simple. The other thing is like when we build a practice that encourages self-awareness around thoughts and emotions and what we're experiencing and naming it and seeing the stories that we're telling ourselves, right? When we do that more, we're able to see it more in the moment, right? So like when the kid is, with the teacher just crying and yelling for mom and don't leave me, and you have to leave because you got to go to work, and you just see him in your rear view just crying, when we have a practice developed and when we've been doing it and noticing ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings, we're able to in that moment call out like, oh, this is guilt that I'm experiencing. Okay, remember, I'm not a terrible mom. Like I'm building resilience for myself and my kiddos, right? We're able to come to that conclusion a little bit faster in the moment. And that's lifelong work, right? Like doing that and developing a practice of just knowing our thoughts that are happening and being aware of them helps in those moments. Just like they say meditation has its benefits, it helps, but you don't really see in that moment when you're sitting necessarily that it's benefiting you, right? It's like after practicing it for a while, you then are like, wow, I'm calmer, or like I'm able to relax more easily, or I'm able to focus more easily. It doesn't happen on one or two sitting for 5 minutes. It's like continual practice. It's a compound effect. Same thing happens with practicing these tools to recognize our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, if you have a dedication meditation practice, it's literally in the words, right? You're like, oh, when I'm sitting down, let's say, or maybe you like a walking meditation, or maybe writing for you as a meditation, that's practice for showing up in life and being able to take just that moment. Like you said, it's so easy to forget to breathe. We do it involuntarily. Our bodies are magical. They're doing all this stuff. But when we actually take the moment, like, oh, I'm holding my breath. Oh, I'm kind of stressed out. Oh, let's slow it down for a minute. And then I can have a new thought that might emerge that might not have come up if I didn't take that breath.
Yeah. One thing that's really fun to think about and do, but you kind of can't do it out in the wild, but like if you have an office where no one's in there, is actually just laying on the ground, like nice clothes and all, just lay on the ground. It sort of like invokes this like relaxation. Sometimes your body doesn't fully relax, but it's sort of this like silly way of just like almost making yourself relax. And I like doing that sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, it reminds me of like a corpse pose and yoga, and you just give into the floor, right? Because you know, even if I'm standing, I'm like, you know, to be holding on all to this stuff. So it's just a way to just let it go.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So we have a few questions here from other parents. Someone asked, "How can I make sure I'm connected with my child, even though I'm a full-time working parent?"
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And that's one of the big things that we're grappling with of the balancing, like balancing work and family. And I would say that work is, maybe 40 hours a week, maybe 60, I don't know, it depends. But there are moments in the week and in the day that you can build connection. And it's really important to be intentional in those moments. So maybe you only have an hour and a half or 2 hours after school, after work, before bedtime. But if you're really intentional about connection in those moments, like maybe even having a list of questions that you ask, depending on the kid's age, but a list of questions, maybe a game or activities that you play, 2 hours can actually be like a lifetime. If we are truly present, our phone is away, like you can build protocols and rules for yourself too, to make sure that you're present. So like no distractions, nobody has their phone, everybody sits down for dinner. We answer these questions about our day. There's really like fun things that you can do to build connection. And I promise that the family who's being intentional with the 2 hours that you get on a Wednesday is going to be much more connected than the family who is, maybe the mom or dad who's home more often, but still running around and not being intentional about conversation, intentional about not being distracted, that sort of thing. So to me, it's okay if you only even have a half hour, if it is like all 30 of those minutes are intentional and aimed to build connection.
Yeah. We were just talking before we went live about the present moment research lab, right? If we just only have right now and we're fully engaged, as those moments then become quite full. And there's a lot that can happen when we're, I'm not a parent, but I have a niece and a nephew. One's 3, one's 2, they're almost 4. And they are, when I'm with them, it's just like laser, and they're all in, and I'm all in with them as much as I can be. And before I know it, I get to see them a week here, a week there. It's like that day was just, bloop, it goes by in the blink of an eye, because it's just every moment is present with them. And even if that was just a couple hours, that then they're full of that, they're full with that, and I'm full with that. And then I don't know, it's just,
and that's a really
good alive.
That's a good example, because you feel connected to your niece and nephew, even though you only get an hour or 2 a week, maybe not even, right? And there are extended family who are so close with kiddos who don't see them and aren't able to like daily build that connection. And that comes with intention when you're with them, right? It's like exciting when you're with them and you are asking questions, you're hearing about their day, all of those things. And so we can do that as parents. We can just be super intentional.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left. Great question here that came in. What are some common misconceptions about parent guilt that you've encountered in your coaching practice?
Yeah. So aligned with what I talked about with reframing, there's this misconception that we shouldn't feel it, something's wrong if I'm feeling guilty. It's like I need to change it, or I'm beating myself up because I'm feeling guilty, right? What's interesting is that, so my theory that I talked about earlier, and it's not my theory, but it's kind of the way the world works, and 50% positive emotion, 50% negative emotion. But if we focus in on something being wrong, that we are experiencing negative emotion, it actually turns into like 80% negative and 20% positive, because we're so focused on like, oh, I shouldn't feel guilty. I need to change this. Something's wrong with me. And that just exponentially grows the negative emotion. So that's the number one, right? Is that something's wrong if I'm feeling guilty. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Really not seeing the gift of it, which is autocorrect, right? It's like, ooh, I'm out of my lane as a parent. Let me recorrect, humble myself, maybe forgive, whoever I need to talk to about that, or forgive myself. So that's the main misconception about it. And I think that's common with a lot of negative emotions. It's like, if I'm angry, I shouldn't be feeling angry. And the approach I take is let's understand the guilt. Let's understand the anger, because oftentimes those are really important places for us to then create maybe boundaries in our life, for us to create different connection and ask questions or ask for help. I'm big on asking for help. So these negative emotions, feeling them is actually a really important part of the human experience. Beating ourselves up about feeling them it goes in the opposite direction.
Yeah, because we beat ourselves up. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be, all these shoulds, right? And then it actually makes, like you said, the story becomes very far removed from the facts. And we have this really intense negative self-talk story that starts getting built up, and it has more and more emotional facts that might not be facts at all, right?
Right. And I think it's actually pretty, so I've seen a lot of articles and stuff out there of like, let's, get rid of guilt. Let's just remove it, and it really is like, that's impossible because we're full humans. And, if we didn't experience guilt, it's just that we are lying about experiencing it. Right.
Yeah.
So let's not do that. Let's instead create a system to manage the emotions, right? Let's see them all as these beautiful, like, messages from our body and messages from our mind that maybe something needs to be done differently, or maybe do more of that if it's a positive emotion. But if we are able to manage our guilt and experience it, feel it, and learn from it, within, let's say just a day, like let's spend it, but maybe even 20 minutes, we're able to do so much more in our parenting and in our relationship with ourselves than, making guilt go extinct, which again is never going to happen as long as we're humans.
Yeah, it's part of the human experience. And therapy was mentioned earlier. I'm a big proponent of it for my own well-being. And I had a therapist that she would always say, emotions are information, right? It's like a fact-finding mission. And I'm an archaeologist, and I get to crack the surface of the ground, and it hurts. And then you dust it off, and then you take a little closer look at it. And guilt has a lot of information in it. Because like you said, boundaries, that's a big one.
Yeah, I will say the emotion that I've found that is so helpful in all of these things is curiosity. If we can get curious about all the things, about the guilt, about, the excavation that's happening, if we can get curious and stay away from judgment, not judging ourselves for feeling guilty, but really getting curious about what does that guilt mean? Or why do I feel resentful when I wake up every day? Or why am I exhausted? Curious from a non-judgmental standpoint, we will discover so many things about ourselves. And that's really what I help my moms do, not my mom. I don't coach my mom. That would be conflict of interest probably. But, for them to get curious and really understand where they're getting in their own way, where self-sabotage is showing up, and creating systems in their life to create more time and energy. And I know live with us here right now, we have two lovely folks, and I'm just going to put my scheduling link in there for the taking of if you are interested in diving a little bit deeper. I know we talked a lot about stories. Everybody's story is unique for themselves. It either serves us or it doesn't serve us. And digging a little bit deeper is really helpful in understanding those pieces. So feel free to schedule time. I have tons of resources, and coaching isn't for everyone, but I think talking about our stories is for everyone. So at the very least, that's a space to do that and to learn a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So in these last couple of minutes, Jenna, for folks here or people are rewatching this later on, what are some practical tips that some parents could start implementing right after this session to begin breaking free from parent guilt and embracing a more powerful and empowering mindset?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the tool, but I'm going to say, let's say you log off and you walk downstairs and there's dishes in the sink, and you had asked your kids or you had asked your partner to not put the dishes in the sink, put it in the dishwasher, right? And you all of a sudden are like feeling angry, resentful, frustrated, maybe depleted, maybe just exhausted, right? In that moment, pull out a piece of paper, sit down, breathe, drop your shoulders, and just write down, do the brain dump, do the first step, right? Whenever you feel these emotions come up, like guilt isn't the only one that this works with. It's just the most prevalent one that I hear about with my clients. Write it all down, write the story I'm telling myself is, and then have that little note of forgiveness. I forgive myself for this BS story I'm telling myself, right? But you will feel so different at the end of the week if every time you face an emotion that is painful or hurts or is negative, if you just have this practice of pulling out a piece of paper. You can throw away that piece of paper when you're done, but building that practice is fantastic. Now, if you go downstairs and you see the dishes and you just like rage, right? Maybe you're not going to think to pull out the piece of paper, even though we just talked about it. So putting a little notebook by the side of your bed and saying, before I lay my head down, no matter how exhausted I am, no matter how double vision I am seeing, I just pull out and fill out one page a night of all the things my brain is telling me about myself, about other people, about my kids, about my partner, about, being a single mom and how hard it is and this and that. It's like, just write it all down. So either in the moment, when you go downstairs and those dishes are in the sink and you said 1,000,000 times, don't put the dishes in the sink, or having the journal by your bedside, maybe even setting an alarm on your watch, if you have a watch, that goes off and reminds you at 9:30 at night, like, oh yeah, 5 minutes to do this practice. I promise it will compound and you'll feel so much better and be so much more aware of how you can handle those hard emotions, how you can manage them.
I love that. And it also really is, then it's like physical story, right? Like there's the story in my head, which feels completely true. And then when it's written out and maybe I read it back, I'm like, oh, now this is a story. I've written it out and can help me start to parse through what perhaps is factual and what is perhaps storytelling of these, like you said, the inner gremlins, right?
Right. Or another way to say is, what story serves you? Like, what story do you want to keep reading and what story do you want to like burn? And I would say like have a practice where you burn that notebook, right? Like we don't want anyone to find that.
No.
Thoughts are anywhere near as terrible as mine are. You want to burn that notebook. Like, don't want your family or friends to find the notebook. They will definitely be worried about you if your thoughts are like mine. So it's like you burn it. Maybe right after you write it. Just rip the page out and throw it away. Whatever you're,
Yeah.
rip it up and throw it away. But yeah,
Yeah.
you can figure out what stories you want to keep telling about yourself and what stories aren't serving you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Jenna, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for making
Yeah.
the time today. And I know you dropped some links in the chat, but for potentially people watching this later, can you share with us how people can get connected with you, what your website is? That would be great.
Absolutely. So my website is jenna.coach. Easy to remember, not .com, it's .coach, jenna.coach.
That's a good
And
get,
my-
Jenna. It's a good get.
I'm trying to simplify here. Okay.
That's what we want.
And my email is jenna@jenna.coach. So Jenna spelled Jenna. So you can email me anytime. Like, I am in this to help all mamas out there, all parents, but really moms. And so, reach out if you have something you're going through, if you need resources, please do. I also have a free mom entrepreneurs support circle. So if you go to my website, email me, you'll be able to get more information about that if you're interested in joining that. It's a monthly gathering that's just like such a delight.
I love that. And that's online, so people can call in from different places. Awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How cool. Great.
Yeah.
Well, Jenna, I hope we get to do this again. I hope it's not another year before we talk next.
Yeah, I might have another kid before we.
Who knows?
We're gonna talk after this, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
You use my
I'll be
link as
following
well.
it. I will. I'm going to book you. I'm going to book some time on the calendar.
There we go.
All right. Thanks, Jenna. And thank you all for your participation. Thanks for the folks that jumped on camera earlier and had a really engaging conversation. And I hope we will see you back here at Power to Fly. It's always a pleasure to be a part of these conversations. And thank you all so much.
Thank you, Hunter. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye now.